May your morning be colorful, joyful, and blessed. This is Mrs. Rose and V. Parane from Payapa National High School, and we are on our way to our Grade 9 Science, Week 4 and 5, Non-Mendelian Pattern of Inheritance. But before we proceed to our discussion proper, let us have a short review. By the way, what do you think is the meaning of genetics? Correct. Genetics is the study of heredity. So it is the passing of traits from one generation to the next. Kapag sinabi nating genetics, hindi natin mahihiwalay ang pangalan ni Gregor Mendel. So sino nga ba si Gregor Mendel? He is a monk who worked in Garden of Monastery in Czech Republic. He used a pea plant to study heredity. And he is known as the father of modern genetics. Okay, so bakit nga ba pea plant ang napili ni Gregor Mendel para itry at para mag-investigate about this what we call genetics or heredity? Kasi meron siyang contrasting traits. Ang pea plant can reproduce sexually and crosses can be controlled. At isa pa, large numbers of offspring at meron lamang siyang short life cycle. So, ang pea plant is normally self-pollinating. So, yung pinag-aralan natin before, ang pollen ay yung tinatawag nating sperm, which fertilizes the ovule or the egg to produce offspring. So, ang pea plant produced genetically identical offspring. But Mendel used cross-pollination in this experiment and used pollen from one plant to fertilize another. So, hindi na natin i-discuss ngayon ang part ng flower, but then again, we have to proceed to our discussion proper. So, the non-Mendelian inheritance. But before that, I have here some terminologies and let's do the unlocking of difficulties. Ang mga terminology na inyong makikita diyan sa inyong screen, ayun yung mga word na makakasalubong natin. So, those are the words that we will be encountering or we will encounter these words at all throughout the discussion. So, mas mahalagang malaman nyo ang meaning ng mga ito para mas madali na rin maunawaan ang ating discussion. First, we have the incomplete dominance. So, pattern of heredity in which one allele is not completely dominant over the other. Next word, we have codominance. Pattern of heredity in which both alleles are simultaneously expressed in the heterozygote. Next, we have multiple alleles. A gene that is controlled by more than two alleles. So, yun ang ibig sabihin ng multiple alleles. Pleiotropy. When one gene affects multiple characteristics. Next, lethal allele. Allele that result in the death of an individual. And the last, polygenic trait. So these traits are controlled by multiple genes. So let us now proceed with our non-Mendelian pattern of inheritance. So in Mendelian inheritance, patterns involve genes that directly influence the outcome of the organism's traits and obey Mendel's law. Kaya nga tinawag nating Mendelian. But most genes in eukaryotic species follow a Mendelian pattern of inheritance. However, there are many that do not. So in the non-Mendelian inheritance is a general term that refers to any pattern of inheritance in which traits do not segregate in accordance with Mendel's law. So these laws describe the inheritance of traits linked to single genes on chromosomes of the nucleus. Okay, so let's begin with our first non-Mendelian pattern of inheritance. Okay, the first one is the codominance. A codominance is believed to be a violation of the law of dominance. When the alleles for a particular trait are codominant, they are both expressed equally rather than a dominant allele taking complete control over a recessive allele. So this means that when an organism was two different alleles, like it is a heterozygote, it will express both at the same time. So look at the picture on your screen. We have one red, two pink, and one white flower. So speckled flowers where the plant breeder has bred two different colors of flowers together, resulting in a speckled hybrid that has patches of color from both parents. Next, number 2, we have incomplete dominance. Sometimes in a heterozygote dominant alleles does not completely mask the phenotypic expression of the recessive alleles, and there happen an intermediate phenotype in the heterozygote. This is called incomplete dominance. With a codominant allele, both traits are expressed at the same time. With incomplete dominance, the same thing happens but the traits are blended together rather than being in a discrete patches. It thus refers to the condition of in heterozygote where the phenotype is intermediate between the two homozygote. Example, look at the picture on your screen. In some plants, the cross of red and white produces pink flowered progeny or the 4 o'clock plant or what we call the Maribilis jalapa or snapdragon. So, the manifestation of the color is very visible wherein the parent are color red and white while the offspring is 100% color pink. So that is what we call incomplete dominance. Next, let us proceed with the polygenic inheritance. Some traits are controlled by many genes such as the height, IQ, skin color, eye color, and many more. Polygenic inheritance happens when one characteristic is controlled by 2 or more genes. Most of the time, the genes are large in quantity but small in effect. For example, in Jamaica, found that 2 pairs of genes A and B causes the difference in skin pigmentation between Negro and Caucasian people. So these genes were found to affect the character in additive fashion. Thus, a true Negro has 4 dominant genes, which is the AABB, and a white has 4 recessive genes, which is expressed in small letter AA and BB. So the first filial generation, offspring, of mating of the recessive trait with the dominant traits, there will be a combination of both recessive and dominant and have an intermediate skin color termed mulatto. A mating of two such mulattoes produces a wide variety of skin colors in the offspring, ranging from skin as dark as the original negro parent to as white as the original white parent. So that is what we call the polygenic inheritance. Next, let's proceed to multiple alleles. Mendel studied just two alleles of his P genes, but the real population often have multiple alleles of a given gene. For example, in ABO blood type in humans, there are three common alleles for the gene that controls these characteristics. The alleles of I and IA and IB are dominant over the I. A person who is homozygous recessive has type O blood. Homozygous dominant or heterozygous dominant have blood type A. And homozygous dominant or heterozygous dominant have type B blood. So the combination of IA and IB people have type AB blood because of the A and the B alleles are co-dominant. So the type A and type B parents can have a type AB child. So the type A and type B parent can also have a child with type O blood if they are both heterozygous. Next example is the gene for coat color of the rabbit, or the C gene, which come in 4 alleles. Capital CC for black, CCH for chinchilla, CH for Himalayan, and small CC for albino. Next, let us proceed with pleiotropy. Some genes affect many different characteristics, but not just a single characteristics. An example of this is Marfan syndrome, which result in several symptoms, usually tall height, thin fingers and toes, lens dislocation, and heart problems. These symptoms also, or although not seem to be direct related, but can be traced back to the mutation of a single gene. So let us proceed with gene linkage. Each chromosome contains more than one gene. If the genes are situated in the same chromosomes and are fairly close to each other, they tend to be inherited together. This type of coexistence of two or more genes in the same chromosome is what we called link. Okay, let's take a look on the picture on your screen. For example, some combination of wing shape and body color are inherited together. Fruit flies that have brown bodies are more likely to have normal wings, while fruit flies that have black bodies are more likely to have vestigial wings. Okay, so let us proceed with our learning task. So for this, for week 4 and 5, we only have learning task 1 to 6. So for our week 4, we're going to accomplish learning task 1, 2, and 3. And for our week 5, you're going to accomplish learning task 4, 5, and 6. So, okay, for our first learning task number 1. Okay, so in learning task number 1, you are going to examine the sample problem given below. Use the same genotypes to determine the offsprings of the crosses between X, BY, or the male and female. With XbXb, find the genotypes of phenotypes, genotypic, and phenotypic ratio of the offspring. So no need to do the Punnett square because it is already given there. So all you have to do is to analyze this diagram. So as you can see, our genotypic ratio is 25% female normal is to 25% female bald, while 25% of male normal is to 25% of male bald. So it means that all of them was distributed by its percentage. Okay, let us proceed with learning task number 2. Read the handout above, exploring Snapdragon, and answer the guide question in your notebook. So in this activity, you will investigate the genetic trait of a flower color in snapdragons which does not follow Mendel's law of dominance. Recalling Mendel's law of dominance, one allele can mask the expression of another allele when they are joined together. Therefore, if a person has a heterozygous genotype, for example, one dominant allele and one recessive allele, he or she will show the dominant phenotype, which is the physical trait. In Snapdragon, there are two alleles for flower color, one coding for red color and one coding for white color. When purebred red plants and purebred white plants are crossed, the resulting offspring, for example, the first filial generation, and are all pink. When the pink offspring are crossed to create a third generation, that is the second filial generation, 25% of the offspring are red. And the 50% are pink. And 25% are white. So these results summarized here in this picture. Okay, so at this learning task number 2, you are going to answer the 2 guide questions. First, state Non-Mendelian's law of inheritance. And second, what are the 2 alleles for flower color in Snapdragon? Okay, so let us proceed with our learning task number 3. Okay, so ano ba ang dapat natin gawin sa ating learning task number 3? Given the genotype and phenotype of flower for P and for first filial, solve the genotypes and phenotypes of the second filial generation. So in exploring Snapdragon, you are going to prove how the following flower color was produced in the first filial and in the second filial generation. So nandiyan po ang ating legend. FR for red flower, FW for white flower, and FW for pink flower. So you're going to make a Punnett square and use the legend. And for our learning task number 4, you are going to answer the following question. Write your answer in your notebook. Generation flower color P, or the parent, red by white first filial 100% and pink second filial was 25%, red 50%, and pink exploring snapdragon prove that how the following flower colors was produced in first and second filial generation. For example, offspring with corresponding percent of second filial offspring with corresponding percent. So here are the guide question. Based on the result of the genetic process, why do you think the red and white flower alleles can interact with one another? Explain both the first filial generation and second filial generation. Next, how are the results of your crosses differ if the red allele was dominant over the other allele? Explain both the first filial and second filial generation. Okay, let us proceed with our learning task number 5. You're going to read and understand the pattern of inheritance in multiple alleles. Answer the guide question in your notebook. Okay, meron kayong makikitang 4 na breed ng rabbit. The first one is the wild type or the brown fur. Chinchilla, black-tipped white fur. Himalayan, white fur with black paws, nose, ear, and tail. While the other end, on albino, it is pure white. So, using the given genotype, find the first filial generation and second filial generation of the cross between black rabbit and chinchilla, the cross of Himalayan and albino, and use the Punnett square below to guide you. Okay, after that, you may answer the guide questions. First one, based on the result of the genetic process, you have shown how do you think the red and white flower alleles can interact with one another. So you're going to explain both the first filial and second filial generation. Number 2, how are the result of the crosses differ if the red alleles was dominant over the other allele? Explain both first filial and second filial generation. Hooray! We're on our last task. Learning task number 6. You are going to create a family tree showing first filial and second filial generation of your mother and father's side. Describe the dominant traits that appear in both families and illustrate your answer in your notebook. Thank you for watching. God bless everyone. Stay safe tayong lahat.